Faith has a way of speaking, not loudly but truly, and its voice is often heard most clearly in what it does. In the Justification of Our Faith, TableTalk Magazine invites us to walk carefully through the wisdom of James chapter 2, verse 24, where living faith steps out of the shadows and into the light of obedience. Here, belief is not weighed by words alone, but revealed through a life shaped by trust in God and love for neighbour. Now for our reading. You see then that a man is justified by works, and not by faith only. James chapter 2, verse 24. Good works of service to God and neighbour flow from saving faith as it is completed or brought to maturity. Abraham shows us this. It is not that his faith was inadequate to save him when he first believed, and that his justification, the declaration that he was righteous in God's sight, was incomplete until he showed himself willing to sacrifice Isaac. Certainly, Abraham was justified the moment he believed the Lord's promises. Faith is not merely for the purposes of securing a righteous legal status, however, its goal or fulfillment is ultimately communion with God. That Abraham's faith made him a friend of God became especially evident on Mount Moriah. This has been the point of James chapter 2, verses 20 through 23. When we grasp James's point, we must reject two different views of today's passage. First, many liberal scholars have said that James chapter 2, verse 24 contradicts Paul's teaching on justification by faith alone. Second, while Roman Catholicism does not teach that James and Paul contradict, the Roman Church does argue, based largely on James chapter 2, verse 24, that both apostles teach that we are declared righteous before God by faith, and the charity, or love, graciously infused into our souls in baptism. This charity makes us perform good works to increase our justification, and the sacrament of penance restores this charity after our mortal sin kills it. These two different errors both assume that Paul and James mean the same thing when they speak of justification. The only difference is that liberals give up on reconciling the apostles, and Rome imports a non-biblical sacramentology to harmonize them. Both options fail as viable interpretations once we recognize, with John Calvin, that when Paul says that we are justified by faith, he means no other thing than that by faith we are counted righteous before God. But James has quite another thing in view, even to show that he who professes that he has faith must prove the reality of his faith by his works. Doubtless, James did not mean to teach us here the ground on which our hope of salvation ought to rest, and it is this alone that Paul dwells upon. When discussing justification, Paul emphasizes the grounding of our salvation, Christ's righteousness received by faith, and James focuses on the fruit of our salvation, good works. Thus, as many people have said, James is really talking about the justification of our faith. How do others know that the faith we claim puts us in a right relationship with God? By observing the good works that we do. Commenting on today's passage, Dr. R.C. Sproul writes, "Here James attacks all forms of antinomianism that seek to have Jesus as Saviour without embracing him as Lord. Just as Paul demonstrated that trusting in one's own works is deadly, so James teaches that resting on an empty or dead faith is deadly. Our good works do not merit righteousness before God. We receive that righteousness by faith alone, yet saving faith always produces good works." This concludes our reading. Thank you for listening.